Hey YouTubers, I had a question come to me from a viewer who was curious about the T setting on the Fuji 690, and the T setting is a shutter speed setting. It stands for time exposure, and it's a little bit of an oddball. It's not like bulb. Bulb is where as long as you keep the shutter depressed or a cable release depressed, the shutter will stay open, and then when you release pressure, then the shutter closes. T is a little weird. T basically opens the shutter until you do something to close it. And on the Fuji anyway, there are two ways to make that happen. There's not a way to make it happen with the shutter button, which is a little bit odd. So I'm going to demonstrate how this works. Right now I don't have the camera set on T. I have it set on a ½ second. I'm just going to demonstrate the shutter doing its thing. This is a double wind camera, and on a Fuji like this anyway, one of these rangefinders, you have to have the back open to dry fire the shutter. So the back is swinging open here, and I'm just going to hit the shutter, and you see the shutter fired and did what it would normally do. That was a ½ second exposure. So I'm going to now set the shutter on T, and we're going to watch how it behaves on T. Okay, I'm going to depress the shutter. You notice the shutter stays open, and my hands are out here. I'm not touching anything on the camera. And it's going to stay that way until I do one of two things. One thing is change the shutter speed. So I just changed the shutter speed and the shutter closed. I'm going to put it back on T, wind it again. I'm going to open the shutter again, and on a Fuji, this is kind of cool, it actually has two shutter releases. I'm going to open it with the front shutter. The other way to get the shutter to close is to wind on to the next frame. The crazy thing is you can't close the shutter by hitting the shutter button again. So I'll demonstrate that. Okay, I'm going to open the shutter. And now, nothing. I wanted to demonstrate this with my cable release because the person that asked the question specifically asked about a cable release. I can't find my cable release. It's gone. It has disappeared. But I'll find it someday. But for the purposes of this video, I'll just point out that the cable release on this camera and any mechanical camera is really just a plunger that's sort of inside of the shutter button, and it won't have any special effect on the behavior. So if I can't do it with the shutter button, you won't be able to do it with a cable release either. So again, in order to close the shutter when you're in T mode on this camera, you either have to change the shutter speed or you have to wind. Which strikes me as a little bit crazy because if you could do it with your cable release, then you could do it without touching the camera at all. With this design, you have to touch the camera. I think the wind method is probably the least perturbing to your photo. And one thing I've also heard people do is they'll throw a hat of some sort over the lens or a dark cloth and then wind the shutter, that sort of thing. So that's the oddball T setting, specifically on the Fuji 690. Hope that answered any questions anybody might have. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you later.